Hey guys, welcome back to JD Mod's Garage. Today I'm doing a how-to video on the RX7 series. This is probably for people out there who have an RX7 like mine and want to convert from the stock sequential turbos to parallel or non-sequential turbos. Now, I'm pretty much following a how-to that I read, and I'll post a link in the description below, but hopefully this video can aid in some visuals, which I was really hoping I could find. Now I finally figured out and understood how to do this myself, so I thought why not film part of it to aid in the description. So by no means is this everything you have to know, but hopefully it can help you guys out if you're looking to do this. I'll explain in 1 minute why I'm doing it, and anyway, hopefully you guys enjoy the video. I'll try and keep it short, so let's get started. So clearly my motor is out of the car. If you're following the build series, you would know that I'm assembling this motor, rebuilding it. I rebuilt the short block, and now I'm just building it all up, and we're at the point now where we are going to be bolting on the turbos. Now I decided to go from stock sequential to non-sequential for a few reasons. I really like a clean engine bay and easy engine to work on, and as you guys probably know, when you go non-sequential, you can delete a lot of stuff. So here's essentially what underneath my intake manifold looks like. You can see there's no rat's nest. That's with all the stock wires still in place so that you can always go back if you wanted to. I also deleted the air pump. You can see the control module is missing from there. It's a JDM motor, so it doesn't have EGR anyway, but that's a fairly clean 13B. It's not done obviously, but that's one of my main reasons for doing this, because my stock system was broken. I didn't want to replace all these expensive solenoids, and I read that the non-sequential, if done properly, is quite fun. It's a little laggier, but nothing I'm not used to probably. And so now we'll go ahead and start with what you have to do. So here is my table of parts, and before we get to the turbo modifications themselves, let's talk about what you first have to remove or delete. The how-to write-up goes through a lot of these steps if it was in the car, but since my motor's off the car, we can just dive right in. These are the two vacuum tanks positioned on the motor. You don't need those anymore. And here is the massive box of solenoids and vacuum lines, the rat's nest hard lines. I've taken all this off. Essentially I kept the bracket that this all bolted to bolt the ignition components on, but this is just a good idea of what you're saving. Pretty much all of this came from under the intake manifold too, which is such a tight spot. It's just a horrendous area to work on with all that, I could imagine. So these are gone too. I just took them out to show you guys. This is another example of something that was broken. I don't know if it was this one or this one. Yeah, it was this one right there. It's broken anyway, and sure, I could have fixed it, but it's one less thing off the engine. I'm also deleting the air pump, which you don't have to do, but I'm doing it anyway. So you got a couple hoses, your air pump itself, and the module on the intake. So another good couple items to come off your motor. Now this, I'm gonna butcher the names of everything, but this is something like the turbo actuator or control gate or something like that. Anyway, this is originally bolted to the kind of front of your motor. It bolts onto the exhaust manifold and basically controls this flap right here. And we no longer need it. So sure, you can leave it on your car, but that's a lot of extra hoses and weight that I am going to be removing, so that also can go in our box over there. And so now we finally get to the turbos and the manifold itself, and the other parts that have to be modified are this little turbo elbow as well. And there's a couple other things in the write-up, but for today's video, we're gonna focus on these few items here. So we'll get to this turbo actuator part in a second, but first let's talk about the manifold. So essentially this is the side that bolts to your motor on the table. and the part up is the part that bolts to your turbos itself. And sorry for being such a noob, but as I understand it, how this works is it's usually in a configuration like this, which forces the exhaust from both housings to go out this one little hole and spool up this turbo really quickly. And that's good and all, except we're going to be going to non-sequential, which means we want this open all the time. But as you can see with it in there, even fully open, it still would produce quite a bit of drag. You can see it's still visible from the inside of the hole. So it has to come out 100%. So to do that, you can see on the top, this thing is kind of welded on with a washer. So we just have to take out our grinder, cut the shaft and the washer off, and then this whole thing, this whole assembly will fall right out of the manifold. So I just finished up that mod. So first I cut off the little flapper on the outside with a saw because my grinder doesn't work super great. So I cut that off, and then I ground off the welds off of this washer, and then you kind of just pry that off with a screwdriver, and then with some pliers you can pull out this guy here. It's just like a little insert. You just pull it out, and then the hole gets a lot bigger, which allows you to kind of wiggle out this flapper guy. So now you have this open hole right here, and what you do with that is drill and tap it for a 3/8 pipe tap. This is a plug I got. It has to be cast iron, same material as the manifold, so that it expands and contracts at the same size, doesn't cause cracking. I'm going to be picking up the tap for this tomorrow, so that I can actually install that. But once that is installed, you can see that it is good to go. It's just a fully open manifold now. So now it's time to move on to the turbos themselves. So there's two things we need to do to the turbo assembly essentially. So over here you have two actuators. This one's your wastegate, and this one is your pre-control, is what this website calls it. Whatever you want to call it. Basically it has an actuator rod that controls this flapper. So you just take off the C-clip, move the actuator rod out of the way. We're going to be deleting this, and essentially this rod, you can see if I get the lighting right, controls a little flapper. If I could get out of the light, controls this little flapper that allows exhaust gas to go through a hole right here where my finger is, right there, through this little hole into the turbo, the rear turbo. So essentially, as we're using both turbos all the time, we want to keep this open, but actually not all the way open. I wish I could show you. Oh, you can kind of see, and now you can really see. So here's fully open, and you can see if I close it a little bit, it kind of lines up with the rest of the housing. So what we're going to do is weld it just like that. You can see I'm holding it open, about 90% is what the write-up says, and we are going to weld this little actuator rod on the outside of the turbo. Don't weld anything in there because there's a chance it could break off and break your turbos and whatever else. So we're going to do that, and we're going to also enlarge the wastegate, which requires removal of this portion over here, basically just taking off all of these bolts, and of course anything that connects the two turbos together, like the water and oil lines. So take apart all that so that you have access to this for the flapper and for the wastegate. So now I have the twin turbos apart. So basically I just had to take off the two the two water lines, the one oil line, and then the two oil drains, and then you undo the four bolts connecting this flange here on the front turbo, rear turbo, sorry, with this flange on the front turbo, the one with the lever on it. So now you can see the wastegate. Let me show you guys what we got here. So this is your wastegate. This is the flapper that opens and closes to control your boost. So you got your exhaust coming in here, and when this is closed, of course, it'll be spinning your turbo, and then when it opens, the exhaust gas goes out here and stops spooling your turbo. But now that we're running 2 turbos, if we leave it at this size, around 1-inch hole, we will probably have some boost creep issues, and you might not be able to control your boost level at all, which, as fun as it sounds, would probably lead to a blown turbo or motor. So what we have to do is open up this hole right here. Right now, like I said, it's around 1 inch, and we are going to be making it around 1.24 inches, which, as you can see, is about the maximum we can go before the hole is bigger than the flapper. So you don't want to go any larger than that. So what we're going to do, I will show you right now. So I just had to go get a marker. This is a orange paint marker, and I'm going to go ahead and just draw a line around the entire outside of the flap so that we know to stay away from this line and don't accidentally make the hole too large. And we're back with a painted wastegate hole. I kind of had to paint the easy to access spots, open it up, add some paint, but now you can tell that that is exactly where the flapper sits. So that is your absolute do not cross line, but also you don't want to get too close to it or else it'll have nothing to rest on. So you can tell that it's actually not centered, which is correct, which is why you also just can't take a drill bit and just send it straight through that hole, because you'll be leaking on this one side. I believe that's correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. So now there's 2 ways to do this. If you have access to a machine shop, get them to do it. It'll take them not long at all, with a boring mill or whatever, end mill, whatever they choose to do. But we're doing a at-home version, so I am actually going to take a Dremel, and I'm just going to go around the circle and stay approximately probably that far away from the orange line. We can always take more material away, but we can never add it back. And then I'm going to measure it, and from what I've read online, most people do 1.24 inches, which is this right here. And I'm going to measure it until I get to 1.24 inches. It's going to be quite the long, painful process with a Dremel, but it's what I have, and a lot of people do as well, so let's get it done with the Dremel. Alright, so continuing with the parallel turbo modifications, I finished up all 3 modifications. I tapped and installed the plug into the manifold. I installed it before realizing I didn't take a clip. But all I did was buy a 3/8 tap. This one's from Princess Auto. It was $7, 3/8 18 NPT tap to install that cast plug I showed you guys. And the one thing about pipe taps, maybe I'll show you guys real quick if you don't know, is that they're tapered. So you can see this little orange mark. It's always a good idea to mark the depth that you will be tapping, and to do that, just measure kind of 3/4 of the way up your plug, tap to that depth, kind of the width of that depth, if that makes any sense, and that just makes sure that you don't tap it too big, and then you can never tighten up your plug. So now essentially we have the manifold all done. I still have to fully torque it, but it's ready to go. And same story with the 2 turbos. So starting with the wastegate, you can see our orange mark, and if I open it up, you can see just how little material is remaining around the orange mark. I was able to hit 1.24 inches in some spots, but in other spots I was kind of too scared to go that big. Also what I did, let's see if you can see. Yeah, you can kind of tell the shiny spot inside the housing. I really, instead of just doing the circle at the top, I really made sure to get right in there and do kind of the leading edges into the circle, kind of where my finger is, to really help the exhaust gases evacuate. So that's that, all modified up, and then there's chips everywhere. So I use an air gun to blow out the turbine vanes and the wastegate hole on both sides, because this side would actually be the one that would get into your motor, and also the oil and water tubes as well. Now to do that, I used a carbide burr. This is just a bullet shaped one. This is what the bit looked like that I used, and honestly, with my little underpowered Dremel at 30,000 RPM, probably took me around an hour to do that. Really quite quick, and saved me going to a machine shop. So that's that. And then over here, I have welded the flapper door open at around 90% of the full open. Don't judge my TIG welds. I'm still learning with my new machine. It's a lot better than the camera makes it look. It's obviously not pretty, but you'll never see it, and it will hold. You can see I did quite a bit down there, and I'm very confident that's not going to move. Don't mind the blue, that's from painting my car. And anyway, that's everything all modified. So now, off camera, I'm going to fully put the turbos back together, and I'm going to mount them to the manifold. So I got the turbos mounted on the motor. They went on quite well. I hooked up my water and oil lines, oil drain. None of that's related to the non-sequential though. So let's keep talking about the non-sequential turbo parts over here. So next up, now that turbos are on, we have to install our Y-pipe. But I'm going to talk about a few things here. First of all, with the non-sequential, we don't need this actuator with the throttle plate anymore. So we're going to go ahead and delete this. I've started with the vacuum lines. There used to be a vacuum line here, and this one too. So I took those off and replaced them with some vacuum caps. And I got this 80-piece assortment vacuum caps, which comes with tons of small ones, which are kind of very handy, especially for this project. That's from Amazon Prime. It was around 20 bucks. And then while we're talking about Amazon, I want to mention the two other things I got. This is the O-ring that connects your two Y-pipe pieces together, and it's like this so that when your turbos expand under heat, the two pipes don't just crack. So mine was missing it altogether, but it's also very common for this O-ring here to be brittle or cracked. Now I did a bit of research, and this here is a number 225 O-ring. Now on Amazon Prime, they had this pretty cool O-ring kit of metric and imperial or SAE O-rings, and you'll notice on the front it has everything included, and this is number 225. It's like a standard O-ring size, and there's actually 10 of these in the kit. I'll show you what the kit looks like. This whole kit for both boxes was $30. These are all Canadian prices. Which I think, how can you go wrong? They're all slightly greased, which is very nice. And so this O-ring here is number R31, which is what they call it, which is a 225 O-ring, which is the perfect size you need for your Y-pipe. So if you're missing that, I would just buy this kit. It's a little bit more money than one Mazda O-ring, and you have, I believe it's around 800 O-rings. So good value. And the last thing I bought off of Amazon was this 6 by 12 inch by 1/8 inch thick aluminum. And this is to make my own block off plates. I'm going to be deleting the air pump stuff, so I'm going to have to make a block off plate for this. And there's also a block off plate on the motor side right here. This one right here has to be blocked off as well. I still have to research about this one. But so how we're going to do that is just take off the O-ring, or the gasket, sorry. I'm stuck on O-rings. Take off the gasket, put it on the steel, trace out, or the aluminum, trace out the shape, then cut it with a saw, drill the holes, and then you can delete this. We also have to remove this actuator, block that off as well, and deleting non-sequential means that the double throttle, which is this guy right here, can also be deleted. So take it off, block it off, and yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and I'll show you when we're done. Before I install the plates, I thought I would give you guys a look at how they came out. So basically I just traced the original gaskets. So we've got, this is the block off plate for this piece. This is the one for the thing that goes under the intake manifold. And then the last one, this one right here is for right here on the intake manifold. Right there, sorry, losing my bearings a little bit. So I cut this out and drilled some holes. And then the other thing I'll note is I made some new gaskets out of this roll of gasket maker that you can also get off of Amazon. I got it locally from Napa, but it's Felpro part number 3118. It's just a rubber fiber sheet. It was like 10 bucks and you can cut your own gaskets, which is exactly what I did. And for this one here, I won't be using a gasket. Instead, I got an O-ring from that handy new kit I got that fits perfectly right there. And I'm going to put that in there because this is a boost pipe and you don't want any boost leaks. So let's go ahead, put all the plates on their respective components, and then go put the components on the turbos. So that pretty much concludes the non-sequential turbo installation. You can see I got that Y pipe installed. And as for vacuum lines, you can see there's tons of caps here. The one I'll mention on camera is just over here on the Y pipe. It's really hard to see, but it's this little nipple coming off the Y pipe right here. This is my new silicone hose that goes to a vacuum line just beside the first oil injector. The other vacuum line's capped off. And for the rest of the vacuum lines, for the non-sequential, just take a look at the link I posted in the description below. It's definitely the best way to view them. Anyway, so that is going to conclude this video. The rest of the assembly is just as normal as if they were sequential pretty much. But if you want to see more of that, subscribe and wait for the current videos that are coming out soon, where I will be probably finishing this off, putting it back in the car, and trying to start it. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this little video. Please like, comment, and subscribe.